Hello and welcome to Fluent English 10, the podcast where we learn English through fun, real-life stories. I'm Elena, your host, and today's episode will make you smile and teach you something important. We all make funny mistakes when learning English. Yes, even embarrassing ones. Today, I'll share a true story from my friend Laura, a brave English student. She made a small mistake that turned into a big laugh and a great lesson. Let's listen to her story and be ready to practice and repeat after.
It was a cold, rainy Tuesday morning, and I didn't feel good at all. My nose was running. My head hurt. And I had a small cough. I stayed in bed for a few minutes, thinking, maybe I should stay home today. But then I remembered we had English class, and I really didn't want to miss it. English is my favorite class. I always feel excited to speak, learn, and ask questions. So I got up, made some tea with lemon and honey, and got dressed slowly. I put tissues in my bag, wore a warm jacket, and left my house with my umbrella. The wind was strong, and the rain was cold. But I told myself, it's okay. You can do this. When I arrived at school, class had already started. The teacher was writing something on the whiteboard. I opened the door quietly and walked in, trying not to make noise or sneeze too loudly. Some students turned to look at me. I smiled at them and walked quickly to my seat. The teacher looked at me and said, "Good morning, Laura. Are you okay?" She sounded kind and a little concerned. I wanted to say, I'm okay, just a little sick. But my brain was still waking up. In Spanish, we say, estoy constipada when we have a cold. It's very common. So I quickly answered, yes, I'm constipated. At first, I didn't notice anything strange, but then I felt the silence. The room got very quiet. The teacher paused for a second and looked surprised. She said slowly, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." One student behind me covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. I looked at her, confused. She whispered to me, "Do you mean you have a cold?" That's when I realized I had said something very wrong. I had used a word that means something completely different in English. After my classmate whispered to me, "Do you mean you have a cold?" My face felt very hot. I looked at her, then at the teacher, and then back at my notebook. My heart started beating faster, and my brain finally woke up completely. I thought, wait, why is everyone so quiet? I replayed my words in my head. I'm constipated. At that moment, I wasn't sure what was wrong, but I knew something felt strange. The teacher looked at me again and asked gently, "Laura, are you feeling okay today?" Her voice was kind, not judgmental, but still a little worried. I nodded and said, "Yes, I'm okay, just a little sick." She smiled and said, "Okay, thank you for telling me." Then she continued with the lesson, but I couldn't focus at all. I kept thinking about the word I said. Why did my classmate laugh? Why did the teacher look surprised? I opened my notebook and pretended to take notes, but my mind was busy. I remembered that English has many tricky words that look or sound like Spanish words. Sometimes they mean the same thing, but sometimes they don't. These words are called false friends, and they can be dangerous. A few minutes later, the same classmate leaned toward me and whispered again. In English, constipated means you have a stomach problem, she said quietly. My eyes opened wide. What? I whispered back. She nodded. When you are sick with your nose or throat, you say, I have a cold. At that moment, everything made sense. I wanted to laugh, cry, and hide under the desk at the same time. I had tried to speak English with confidence, and I used the wrong word. A very wrong word. But also a word I would never forget again. After the class ended, I stayed in my seat, feeling embarrassed, but also a little curious. My classmate smiled at me and said, Don't worry, we've all made funny mistakes before. That helped me feel a little better, but I still felt nervous about what I had said. As the other students left the room, the teacher walked over to my desk. She had a kind smile on her face and spoke gently, not in a loud or serious voice. Hi, Laura, she said. Can I talk to you for a moment? Of course, I replied, trying to smile, even though I felt nervous. She sat down beside me and said, You said something interesting this morning. Do you know what constipated means in English? I laughed a little and said, I do now. I meant to say I have a cold. She smiled warmly and nodded. Yes, that's a common mistake. Many Spanish speakers say constipated when they mean sick. But in English, she continued, if someone says I'm constipated, it means they have a stomach problem. It means they can't go to the bathroom easily, she added quietly so no one else could hear. I covered my mouth and laughed. Oh, no! That's not what I wanted to say. She laughed too and said, Don't worry, it happens. Honestly, I've heard that mistake many times. You know what's great? She said. Now you'll always remember the correct way to say it. Then she wrote something on a piece of paper for me. Correct expressions. I have a cold. I don't feel well. I have a cough. I have a sore throat. I'm feeling a little sick. She handed me the paper and said, You can keep this. Maybe review it at home. Thank you so much, I said. This is very helpful, and I'll never forget the word cold. She smiled and said, You're doing great, and it's better to make a mistake and learn from it. I walked out of the classroom feeling a little embarrassed, but also proud that I had learned something new. Later that day, I met up with 2 friends from my English class at a small cafe near the school. We always meet there after class to drink something warm, review vocabulary, and talk about what we learned. They were already at the table when I arrived, and I sat down with a big smile. One of them looked at me and said, So, how do you feel now, Miss Constipated? I laughed so hard, I almost dropped my tea. Yes, yes, I said. I know. I said the wrong word." We all laughed together, not in a mean way, just friendly, real laughter. I told them everything. How I said I'm constipated, how the teacher looked confused, and how I finally learned the truth. "It's funny," I said. "In Spanish it's normal, but in English it's something very different." They nodded. One of them said, "I once said I'm embarrassed when I meant pregnant." "What?" I laughed. "Yeah, in Spanish we say embarazada, but in English, embarrassed means something else," she said. That's when I realized we all make mistakes like this. Language is full of confusing words, and sometimes they look or sound familiar, but mean something very different. These are called false friends, and they are tricky. But instead of feeling bad, I felt lucky. I made a mistake, yes. But now I will never confuse those words again. And even better, I had a story that made people laugh and helped them learn too. Later that night, I even told my older brother the story. He laughed and said, "Now I'm afraid to speak English." I said, "Don't worry, just be careful with your stomach vocabulary." It felt good to laugh about it, instead of feel ashamed. Mistakes can be funny, helpful, and powerful when we use them to grow. And that day, I learned 2 things. 1, how to say I have a cold in English. And 2, that learning is better with laughter. After that day, I thought a lot about what happened in class. At first, I felt embarrassed. Of course I did. Nobody wants to say something wrong in front of others. But little by little, I started to feel something different. I felt proud. Why? Because I didn't stay quiet. I tried to speak. I showed up. I learned. Before, I was afraid to make mistakes in English. I always wanted to say the perfect sentence. But now I understand that mistakes are part of learning, not something to be ashamed of. That little mistake, just one wrong word, taught me more than a grammar lesson ever could. Now, I always say, I have a cold with confidence and a little smile. I even help other students who say the same thing I did. Also, I learned how powerful kind people can be. My teacher didn't laugh. She didn't make me feel bad. She explained with patience and kindness. My classmates helped me too. Not by correcting in a rude way, but by laughing with me. And that made a big difference. So now, when I study English, I don't only memorize words. I try to use them in real life. I speak. I make mistakes. I learn. And when something funny happens, I write it down and share it with my friends. To anyone listening to this story, I want to say this. Don't be afraid of small mistakes. Be afraid of missing the chance to speak. The more you speak, the more you learn. And maybe one day, your mistake will become a story, just like mine. One that makes someone else smile and say, "It's okay. That happened to me too."
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fluent English 10. If you enjoyed this story, please like it, share it, or send it to a friend. Maybe someone you know has also said, "I'm constipated," by mistake. Learning English is better when we laugh and learn together. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories and speaking practice. I'm Elena. See you next time on Fluent English 10.